Hey, this is Isaiah here. Let's create a game. I'm going to talk about how to read and write a game design document. So if you're at our website, you go into Resources, and under Resources on the right, you'll see we have the technical design document and the game design document. So go ahead and open up the game design document. It's blank. It does have the layout of how to formulate your document. Uh, Off the bat, it's going to be a read-only mode if you're using OpenOffice, so just go ahead and go to edit mode, and you're off here. So basically, a game design document is where you keep all the information together for your project. So if you were to hand your project over to somebody else or somebody joins your project and they want to get the insight of what's going on without actually having to sit down and explain everything to them, it should be all listed in the document, from gameplay to who's working on the project, what kind of game it is, the menus, anything you think of that is not a technical aspect of the game. You write in this document here, and you can edit as you progress the project. But it definitely helps out when somebody wants to know more about your project and is directly interested in working on it with you, that you can hand this document to them, and then they're free to read it. It can have sensitive information in there, so you don't just want to give it out to anybody who's interested in looking at the project, but definitely if they have financial backing or if they are officially part of your project, then you have to give them this document. So you have a section here that says your title, and that would be the title of your game. Sometimes people will put a working title, your like covert name, if they're working on a project that they don't want to announce the actual title for yet. So other times they just put a name down, leave it as working title for a while until it is finalized. You want to write version number. That's just the version you have. You start at it was 1.0, and you work your way up every time you have edited it. Oh, it didn't work. Then you have the create time. That's the date you created it. That never changes. So whatever date it is, you write it there. And every time you update it, you put the update date in there. Because if they have an older version, there's no way for them to tell what version they have unless they go by the date there. And then on the table of contents, I wrote this everything for you already. The point of this is that you copy this into your document and fill it out as you go. So when you turn it into a PDF or what have you, you're able to actually bookmark each section, so they don't have to flip through 30 pages to find gameplay or menu layout. They can actually just grab the bookmarks and find out where they're looking. You can say page 3, section 2.5, level layout, and there you go. So that really helps anybody that wants to look at the project quickly. So executive summary, I consider that an elevator speech. Basically, if you are in an elevator with some executive or somebody that has financial backing that you want to pronounce your project to quickly and efficiently, keep it down to 15 to 20 seconds, maybe a paragraph, and they should be able to walk away with everything they need to know about your project. This also happens to work for anybody just directly interested in your project. You don't have to sit there and explain the long version of your project, because nobody's going to listen that long, especially if you're just ranting about your random ideas. High concept usually is just a premise. I usually leave that blank, but it would be the premise of your project. And a lot of these things you see here are kind of redundant, but as you fill all of them, they're very necessary in different aspects of the project as a whole. You have core gameplay. You write what kind of game it is. So for Arcane Knights, we're making hack and slash games, so I would write, 4-player hack and slash game, medieval fantasy, or whatever I'm writing there. If you're writing a shooting game, you kind of write about, there's a single player militant game, action adventure, or whatever. Genre, that kind of goes under gameplay. For me, I would write hack and slash. Target audience is whoever you're actually focusing your game towards. This is good to keep it set throughout the whole project. So if you say, anybody from 16 to 25, you keep making sure that as you make content and create the game that you stick to that audience. because if you alter from that too much, that's actually looking bad on your part, especially if you're handing this document to somebody and they say, okay, I'll give you the green light to make this. They want you to make sure you stick to what you wrote down there. Team members, jobs, and contact info. Use what it says. You write down the name of the person for each category. So I write myself, I write my job, I write my contact information in that order, and it allows anybody to grab this document to be able to email me really quickly, call me really quickly, Skype with me, whatever they have to do to get a hold of me. The information is listed there. It's not so relevant if you're all in the same building, but sometimes when you have people spread apart, it's really helpful. And we have game overview. Is writing about the overview of the game. It's kind of like the high concept. It's the premise of the game, what it's about, what's going on, why is this being made. And then story, this can be really elaborate or a paragraph. Usually a lot of people will link as an attachment their whole story. So if they have 30, 40 pages, they'll link it as a attachment to the actual game document, so you can read it separate from this. And so you're going to write that paragraph anyways, something you want to memorize quickly and efficiently that kind of goes to the executive summary. You catch them on that, they say, oh, tell me about the story. You give them a paragraph about the story. Don't go into too much detail because, of course, you have other assets for that. Characters, list out all the characters that are main playable characters in your game. Most games only have one or two. Sometimes you can edit that. If you only have one playable character, then list out the appropriate people that are going to be in direct contact with that character throughout the game. Don't list out every single possible enemy or friendly and all that. That's all going to be in the technical document, so that's not necessary. And environments, you just list out every single level you're going to have in the game in order, more or less. Probably alphabetical order would work. Some people just write it based on the first level they're going to go to, so the last level they're going to go to. And then for level overviews, you take each one of those environments you wrote out and you write a sentence or two about the level. You say, oh, I'm going down the street, and when you get down the street, you're going to get into a car, and there's a cutscene, and in that cutscene, then the next level starts. That's just actually really short, but if that's a level, then you write it that way. Most times they'll say there's a boss at the end of the level that you get X item from that boss to progress to the next level. For gameplay, it's self-explanatory. Combat, what kind of combat is in the game? Are you playing a game that requires you to have a gun? Are you button mashing for a fighting game? All those things you should list out there. If it's kind of mixed together, you just write it too. Abilities, what abilities does your characters have, if any? List them out there. Scoring system, if you have a scoring system, write it there also. A lot of times we'll leave that blank or say not available until you actually come up with a good system, unless your game depends on a scoring system from the start. Sometimes extra modes will have scoring systems, then you go back and actually edit it to add that there. Power-ups kind of can be like abilities, but you might say if I get 10 kills, I get a power-up, then I get to use my power-up and it does this. So write that also there for anything, any of the power-ups that are in the game, you list them there. And it varies based on your gameplay. If you're playing a shooting game, you're going to have a different kind of power-up system. The Call of Duty franchise uses something called perks, so when you get X amount of kills, your perk activates a specialty like a helicopter or whatever. So you have to write it accordingly to how your project is listed. And then for menu layout, most of this I have left blank from the start because it's important to have, but as you progress it's easier to write it in there. Color scheme, game title screen, legal information, menu screen, all those things kind of is almost secondary along with anything in the menu layout. So you might just want to put a quick sentence for each area so it's not blank, but then add it as you go. Color scheme can actually be moved to this section, but because I couldn't find a better place to put it, I felt like leaving it there would be best. And then you go on to game layout. What kind of camera setup? Is your camera over the top, third person, 2/3 down? Is it first person? Is there multiple types of camera setups? You press a button, it switches between cameras. You have to write that in there. Game controls. Most of the time, depending on what engine you're using, you can have it set for the basic controls, which is built into the engine, or if you have custom controls, you write it there also. Most of the time, you're going to have the basic controls listed. I know it sounds redundant because if anybody plays a game, on a keyboard, W moves forwards, S is backwards, mouse moves your camera around, but you have to list it there. Because anybody reading this document doesn't particularly have to be able to play games to know what they're reading. Then you have game modes. How many modes are there? What kind of modes are there? How is single player different than multiplayer? Is there a multiplayer? What kind of multiplayer you have? Anything to do with game modes, you're right there. And it might be really short. You might just have single player, cooperative, and nothing else. Or you might have 3 different modes depending on what kind of game you're playing. Player count, that kind of goes with game mode. If you're having a cooperative game, how many people can play with you? If you're playing by yourself, can people join later? And add the count up higher. Is there a multiplayer section that has 20 people? Once again, it coordinates with your game modes. And then you have hour gameplays. You want to make sure that you figure out how long your levels are and then add them all up together to estimate how long your game is. This is something you'll have to edit as you progress. Some people want to know finitely how long your game is, so if you write something, you better stick to it. I don't find that to be true, but depends on who you're really actually working for. Usually 45 minutes a level is about maximum you want to go. Depending on what game it is, if it's an RTS game, then you might be a lot longer per level. And so that's just the outline of the game document. Like I said, use copy all this text and start filling it out below in sections, and you're able to pretty much have 8-9 pages worth of information. You hand it to somebody and they're happy to work with you because they know that you have the ideas written down and it's not just floating in your head and you're actually progressing through a project.